if you have a question for our esteemed panel of PACE administration, PACE user, creative financing guru from around the world, up to 10 billion, and that's with a V. Let's hear it. First question, David?
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of working.
If you wouldn't mind speaking to the mic, because we are videoing this, and we want to capture the audio of all the questions too. Thank you.
My name is Dave Bucko. I'm a corporate lawyer, investor, entrepreneur, but I've had the pleasure of working with Mark, and he's absolutely outstanding for these kinds of projects. I was wondering, Mark, as you're looking at the trends going forward with all the things going on in finance and the economy and so forth, are you seeing some shifts as far as debt equity, and if so, what?
Well, again, it's like I started in the beginning. I think it depends on whether your project is commercial or first commercial. Commercial being it's up and running someplace in the world and operating and working, and it's retiring the debt service. That's how I look at commercial. That might not be the second project. It might be the third or the fourth. It's how the banks perceive it. When you get into this renewable space, whether you're in power or fuels, a lot of on the power side, solar, wind, geothermal, they're pretty much conventional renewables now. So you can go out longer on your debt with a 70-30 to an 80-20. When you get into energy storage, pairing that up with solar or wind, those are new technologies. And so you can piggyback on top of a conventional technology like solar or wind and maybe get some better terms, but you're going to get closer to a 60-40, 50-50. If your storage is out on its own or connected to the grid, you're really in the Wild West. I mean, you're going to be probably 40-60 to 50-50, I would say, for starters. Same thing with fuel. If you're in the bioeconomy, that is closer to the present than solar and wind. Some of those are conventional renewables, some of them aren't. Like I'm doing a lot with jet fuel, biojet fuel right now. Those are all first commercial. Biogas is not, that's commercial. But energy storage is now about 5 years behind the bioeconomy. And so those are the toughest projects to do right now. And of course, the larger the project, the harder it is to get it financed.
I know we have some storage people in the audience. Any follow-up questions for that? Any other questions? Because I got a whole bunch of them ready to go. This is your opportunity. This is almost free legal advice. Yeah, go ahead, Janine.
Be careful with that.
Oh, sorry, Mark. Don't want to put you on the spot.
Hey, Mark, you've worked all around the world. I was very impressed when we had our speaker call with you. And I know you've been doing bioenergy in New Mexico and other states. But in terms of the DC area, what are you seeing in terms of opportunities? I know you'd mentioned HUD has some sort of incentivized funding and that sort of thing. So just really wanted to get your finger on the pulse of the DC area. If there are any projects coming down the pike that you think are exciting or opportunity-wise.
Well, there's a number, if you go on the fuel side, there's a number of waste to energy projects like municipal solid waste to fuel. It's going to be basically renewable diesel. On the power side, that's getting driven more recently by the mayor of DC with the new 100% marker for RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard. And that's going to drive a lot of those types of projects, and there's a lot of solar that's developing, and they're requiring them on the buildings and some with the government. The city government. The energy storage is also getting a leg up in Maryland in particular. Maryland was the first state to unify the entire tax credit. The problem has been there that you don't get the 30% tax credit if you're an independent storage unit or you're connected to the grid. It's got to be connected to the power unit itself, solar or wind. And then you can get the 30% ITC, and there was a recent tax ruling that allowed a group to come in after the fact, after the in this case, the solar project was operated and put storage in, and Treasury said that'll work. But in Maryland, they have unified that credit. They're the only state right now to have that unified credit, and people are trying to get that through the legislatures, meaning that if you're in any one of those three buckets, connected to the grid, independent, or connected to the power plant, you get the 30% tax incentive. So that's big for Maryland. Virginia doesn't have an RPS. They're trying to get that through. Dominion's been a big block on it. But Dominion is also adding in a lot of solar. They're getting very creative. And so it won't surprise me to see that might happen there, which will drive a lot of renewables into this area. But I'm very bullish on this whole tri-state area.
Other questions? Musa? Oh, why don't we take some from the audience? Musa's going to be on stage. Actually, go ahead. That's fine.
The mic back here.
Bruce with BGB Investment Partners. So I'm on later. I'll be talking about green buildings a little bit. But can you walk through, I guess this is Peter and Scott, a little bit about sort of summarize what a builder, developer would need to do to take advantage of the PACE program, how it's financing, the structure, I mean, and how does that impact the capital stack, those kinds of things?
Yeah, thanks. So oftentimes the reason the developer is drawn to CPACE is for a few reasons. One is they can integrate it into the capital stack and potentially finance the building in a more capital efficient manner. And so the benefits to them would be a building that's lower cost to operate. They're able to potentially bring back into scope certain measures that may have been cut from scope, value engineered out of scope during the design phase. And if they do this, and in Virginia, in Arlington County, the hurdle is that a developer has to exceed state code energy performance, code required energy performance by 15% or more. And if they exceed it by 15%, they become eligible for 15% of CPACE in the capital stack. And that applies to the total eligible construction cost. It's all the hard and soft cost for the physical structure. So if it's a $100 million building, we're talking 15 million, it's capped at 20%, so 20 million, it's 15 to 20 million. And so the reasons, from the public policy perspective, they want it, the Arlington County wants the developers to, aim higher with the performance systems. If they do that, and they can integrate that CPACE into the capital stack, and most developers are looking to limit their use of a higher cost form of capital. Typically, that's going to be the mezzanine finance or the equity, and that's typically where the discussions go then, and then they can, of course, use the CPACE financing in the projects.
Good, thank you.
So this is, first of all, thank you for the three of you for speaking today. I appreciate your time. This is a question for Peter and Scott. Can you describe for CPACE what the minimum, average, and high end for the loans are, as well as what the current interest rate is for that?
Yeah, so for the CPACE applies broadly in two contexts: existing buildings and then new construction. And it was historically sort of born as a solution for the existing building space. New construction is an emerging market. Anyway, so what I'm going to throw out at you is primarily constituted by existing building retrofit projects. The vast majority of CPACE projects is somewhere between 300 and 700K. So that's the sweet spot, and oftentimes that's it's overweighted in terms of Class B and C properties. This is not the nice shiny trophy buildings you see sort of along the Roslyn and Ballston corridors, typically a block or two off that main drag. So that's what the Class B and C property is, and it's often characterized by deferred maintenance, some form of a capital constraint with the property owner. That's the sweet spot in the existing building space. And the new construction space, you can count on four hands the number of new construction deals done nationwide. So that's still an emerging market, but those are going to typically be much larger size deals. Minimum in Arlington County, the minimum is $50K. But realistically, a lot of the capital providers tend to look for $75K and above projects. And there's a cap in Arlington County set at $25 million as far as the upper bound on CPACE. Anything you wanted to add?
So for Maryland, for example, Maryland's got a little bit further developed market right now. I think the minimum, the lowest amount, Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's around 120K. And the largest is just right around maybe a shade over 2 million. And so that gives you an idea of the range. Completed projects, yeah. And as far as the interest rate goes, I mean, it varies depending on, there's an underwriting process like there is for any loan. And there's a lot of factors that are considered, the building owner and the building condition, all that. But the interest rates are generally anywhere between 5 and 7, and that's a big range. But that's just to give you an idea.
Thank you.
Good. We're going to be running this panel and Q&A until about 7:25. So if you have questions, get your hands up.
Thank you all three of you for your time. My name is Corey Ramsden. I have a question for Mark. Have you been involved with any electric vehicle charging infrastructure investments, and how does financing perceive that risk as opposed to what you talked about?
Good question. So I do have a client that is doing the electricity infrastructure charging, and we're in the development phase, so we don't have it financed yet. But that's where you'd want to take it into, say, the DOE has a program for first commercial. It's called the 1703 program, and that's where we're going to have them in there. And they've got a program where it's called a facility plan, where you can do 10, 20, 30, 40 of these and set the money aside for a negotiated period of time, and you can get up to 30 years financing at a fixed rate. And the fixed rate is going to be treasuries, whatever treasury is in a 10 or a 20 or a 30. So a 10-year treasury right now is 272 basis points, or 2.72%. And you add on a 37.5 basis points and a credit spread. So you're going to be roughly in a 4% range fixed for that period of time, and they can do up to 70%, even though the rule allows them to go to 80%. They've never gone over 70% except once. We had worked on, I was involved in every one of the closings in the last rounds there for $34 billion. There were 31 projects, or 33 projects closed. And so you could have all that money set aside and pull it down as you need it. In the renewable program, there's $4.5 billion available. And so it's a way to look at it, because they are using a loan guarantee over the federal finance bank out of the Treasury. So instead of going out and having to convince a bank all the time and going through the headache of trying to get a bank to put that money up, this is a way to do it.
Well, there are a lot of heads nodding as you guys are talking. Really smart panel. Another question toward the back there, Eric?
Hello. Hi, I'm Jeremy Foster with USAID. Question for Scott. I appreciate the overview on CPACE and the commercial work. Just curious about if there's been any progress on residential PACE programs in the region, and what sort of opportunities or challenges you see in that area.
Yeah, great question. So in the residential space, it's a topic of conversation here in Virginia. I think we're probably a few years off. The state law, the state statute did not enable residential PACE. And so to clarify what that means, I'm gonna bifurcate the residential market into properties with 4 or fewer units, and then 5 and above multifamily. So 5 or more units in a multifamily context is eligible for CPACE now. 4 or fewer units is going to fall in the RPACE space. That is currently ineligible. Condominiums are also ineligible by state law right now. So as far as the prospects for it, I think long term, they're good. Tough to handicap when it'll happen in Virginia. But I hope it's not too far down the road. I think there's demand for it. A quick primer. There are only 2 R-PACE markets nationwide, one in California and Florida, and they've had a number of issues around consumer protection because in the residential market, the due diligence in the projects is at a much general lower level than it is in the commercial space. So CPACE and R-PACE are 2 fundamentally different markets. That lack of quality in the due diligence led to some consumer protection issues. Some unsavory contractor types were hoodwinking, old ladies, overselling them on the performance of certain systems that never materialized. And then they owe the money and they've got no savings to pay for it. That's a problem. So the industry needs to solve some of these consumer protection issues before R-PACE will really catch fire. But I think they're looking at ways of adding new regs at the federal level right now. And if they're able to solve this puzzle, I think R-PACE has a bright future.
Yeah, Scott, this is a related question. I'm Peter Burke with QMII, but related to residential. If a condominium owner, there's a lot of new condominiums going in, they're all LEED certified, they're all pretty green to start, but the older units need to compete with that. If a commercial condominium owner gets a PACE loan and after he gets it retrofitted decides to convert it to ownership, I think you've already answered it, but right now you're saying that couldn't happen. If you had, say, 20 units, you got the PACE loan, the commercial PACE loan, and then converted it to private ownership, that would be a problem because they'd have to pay it off generally, unless the PACE loan could transfer to the new owner.
So let me make sure I'm understanding. So the condominiums are typically privately owned anyway, and they can pursue a couple of financing options, just not CPACE. They can pay cash if they can get agreement with the with the condominium association and whatnot. They can pay cash. They could potentially get a commercial loan, but by state statute, condos are out for CPACE eligibility. They're also just generally tougher projects to get over the finish line, but the statute just renders them dead on arrival. For CPACE.
Last question here in the front, and then we're going to wrap. The gentleman on the panel will be here for the rest of the night, right? Finishing off the pizza and the beer. So we'll have the last question here, and then we're going to wrap.
Hi, Adler. Really appreciated your presentation. Probably for Peter and Scott, can you talk a little bit about the level of ambition you've seen of project developers taking on more capital-intensive upgrades, such as cogeneration, advanced boiler systems?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's driven by incentives as far as the cogeneration systems especially. There's certain, in Maryland, for example, they have a pretty good grant program for combined heat and power systems. Right now, I think it might be 50% of the system, and then also BG&E offers a rebate for that. And so as far as the ambition goes, I think it's kind of driven by those incentives. And the utilities have kind of selected these they work with ICF, who's sort of their consultant to administer the rebate program, and they're the ones that are kind of charged with going around and trying to encourage companies to pursue these types of systems. And I guess we'll see that the deadline for that grant is February 14th of this year, and so we'll see when the results come back who's going to be going forward with that. We've certainly moved a few. We've definitely gotten some interest among customers that we've talked to on the industrial side. If they have a consistent thermal load, then it's generally a good fit for that. So we've seen some ambition there, and CPACE would be an excellent way to finance that, I think. So.
Great. Go ahead, Scott.
He covered it well. I would just add that the ambition it's a project by project issue, right? And it will be a matter of sophistication of the service providers, their awareness of the various options that are out there. And so part of my job, and hopefully you'll help me with this, is to spread the word about what CPACE benefits could be brought to bear. And so and hopefully there's more comparing CPACE next to the other financing options. I'll leave it at that.
Great. Well, on behalf of everybody in the audience, there was a lot of questions, a lot of heads nodding. We thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time this evening.